Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today it's time for Friday Reads. It's a double wide edition because I didn't make one last weekend because we had company. And so I have extra books. It's going to look like I read a ton of books, but because it was 2 weeks, so it's not really that much. And I'm wearing my Drink Tea Read Books shirt. Da 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 da! Because one of my annual holiday traditions launched this morning. My favorite tea company, which is Plum Deluxe out of war-ravaged Portland, Oregon, launched the pre-order for its Advent calendar. They put together a really beautiful one every year, and you can choose caffeinated or uncaffeinated, and you pre-order it now and then it ships out a little bit later. A lot of companies have their Advent calendars up and some have already sold out. So I have another annual tradition of just wandering through and looking up all these different tea Advent calendars. And sometimes I order a second one just for fun. But I think that maybe I'm not going to get a second one this year because, first of all, I'm getting the one that I love the most. They put 2 teas in each day. So if you love the tea, you get a second one. And then on Christmas Day, they open up where you can buy more of the ones that you like, because there's special flavors that are only in the calendar and not in their usual shop. And then some of the flavors are from the shop. So it's this whole thing, and there's a Facebook, well, they have a main Facebook group, but there's a spoilers Facebook group of people who want to talk about the daily flavors, and it's this whole big old nerd festival about tea. I do like exploring and trying different ones, and I might come across one that I want to add in there, but maybe I don't need that. And everything in general is more expensive. Groceries, we've added a new family member and have to keep his expenses in mind. So anyway, maybe I'm good with my one main calendar. When it gets here, I'll show it to you. In the bookish news, a lot of stuff happened this week. The MacArthur Fellowships were announced. I love this prize because you can't apply for it. You can't submit suggestions for it. They just choose an assortment of really fascinating, creative, innovative people in all different fields, and they win an $800,000 award that they can apply to their work or to their living so that they can continue their work. And sometimes an author is in the mix. So this year, Tommy Orange won a MacArthur Fellowship, and I'm thrilled for Tommy Orange. I think that's a great choice. Then the Kirkus Prize announced its winners too, and they had a really interesting fiction shortlist, and their winner was Lucas Schaefer for his novel The Slip, which is set in Austin, Texas, and has to do with a teenage boy who goes missing in a boxing gym, and I don't know what else. Apparently it has lots of twists and turns and things going on and humor, so that looks interesting, and a couple other books on that list looked really interesting to me as well. And then, of course, the Nobel Prize in Literature, which went to the Hungarian author Laszlo Krasznahorkai. I think that's correct. I looked up this name, this pronunciation, right before I made the video, and I was like, I got it. And then I got to this part, and I thought, I don't got it. So I had to go look it up again. I have not read this author. He sounds really challenging and unusual. I heard that his most recent book was a 400-page single sentence. And so maybe in 2026, I want to at least sample his writing and see if it's a style that I would be interested in reading or not. I like to at least, I don't necessarily read every author that wins this prize, but I like to at least look at their work and try something out. So I have that in mind for the upcoming year, because the current year is full. There's no room on the dance card for Laszlo, so he will have to wait until 2026, but congratulations, sir. In TV watching, the best thing that we're watching is, of course, the Great British Bake Off, which is on tonight, and we're watching a rather boring season of Only Murders in the Building. Maybe this needs to be the last one, because I don't know. I don't understand this plot, and it's not very funny. And we start to watch it, and then a little ways in, I look over, and both of us are just on our phones or iPads, just kind of doing something else on the side. So it's just kind of meh. So it's kind of disappointing. But Slow Horses started up, and that's been good so far. We finished the preposterous first season of Alien Earth. I'm not recommending it. We just kind of wanted to see what would happen, and it did sort of end on a cliffhanger. So I guess they're hoping that they're going to get renewed. And what else? I think that's it. We're waiting for some other things to start back up. I did watch a really excellent and funny production of The Importance of Being Earnest that is on YouTube in conjunction with having read it. And I'm going to talk about that when it comes up in a minute. And okay, so let's move on to the reading, because there was quite a bit. So when last we spoke, I was halfway through Seascraper by Benjamin Wood, and I was already angry. Well, not angry, but perplexed perhaps that it is not in the short list for the Booker Prize. I still am even more perplexed because this was just a beautiful, just exquisite, quiet gem. So good. Definitely you'll be hearing about this again when I get to the end of the year and talk about books of the year. It's slim and potent, and just really, the writing is so beautiful. So now I'm looking into the backlist of Benjamin Wood, and it's one of those, how come I hadn't heard of this guy kind of situations. There is a town on the coast of England, which is Longferry, and a young man, a 20-year-old man named Thomas, works as a shrimper, and he shrimps in the old-fashioned style that his grandfather taught him, using a horse that drags the nets. Everyone else is moving to mechanized equipment. It's the early 1960s. Thomas lives with his mother, who was ostracized as a teenager for becoming pregnant with Thomas at 15 or 16 when she was unmarried. They lived with the grandfather. And it's been a really rough life. We find out that Thomas's father, was one of her teachers, but somehow the onus of this all has fallen on her and not on him, and he died in the war, etc., etc. Wood really does a remarkable job of making Thomas's mother a sympathetic character, even though she's also not. She's pretty harsh, she's needy, she's demanding, but I could really empathize with how her life has led her to this place. And Thomas is yearning for some kind of outlet or escape, and he's secretly playing and singing. He's playing the guitar and singing, but hiding it out in the shed because he doesn't think his mother will understand, or she'll make fun of him, or she'll denigrate him. And he's trying to build up his nerve to sing and play down at the pub. He's also trying to build up his nerve to ask out a young woman named Joan, who happens to be the sister of his best friend, and he's nervous about that as well. He's just kind of stalled out, and he's in this very, very demanding, physically demanding daily routine with the tides in the shrimp boat. And then this guy comes along, a Hollywood director who comes into town. He sees Thomas out on the beach, and he comes to his home and kind of dazzles his mother, and he offers him a job. He wants a sort of a guide and an assistant on shooting some beach scenes in the fog for this movie. And he talks about the novel that the movie is based on. And Thomas is skeptical. This guy seems like he maybe has a lot of smoke and no fire, but he agrees because the money sounds really good. He figures, well, okay. So he's going to go out and show him some locations and things. That's basically the setup of the plot, and it all takes place over one day and then the next morning. And a lot of people who've talked about this book, either in video reviews or in print reviews, have said that it doesn't really have much plot or action, that it's really just a book about the atmosphere and the setting and the character of Thomas. I agree about the importance of the atmosphere. The beach and the fog are almost like, and the weather, just the wet, heavy, cold, damp weather, all that is almost like an extra character. But I disagree that not much happens in this book. I think a lot happens in this book. It is really subtle. It is the seismic change, or the moment of the catalyst that changes the path of your life. I don't want to say too much about it, but it is about that hinge that can occur, and either you take it or you look back on your life later and you see that it was there and you didn't take it. I thought that there was suspense, there was wonderful character development, there was visible character change and growth. There was some amazing conversations and Thomas's internal dialogues. So I thought it was very, the only thing I could possibly compare it to in style and emotional impact would be Claire Keegan. Small things like these kind of vibes, where you have all these details about somebody's day and this routine and pattern that they're in, and then something happens. There's a pivotal moment. So I loved Seascraper. The next book that I finished has gone back to the library, but I really enjoyed it, and it was the original by Nell Stevens. I haven't really heard anybody else talking about this book, but it was a lot of fun. And this was a book that I had on my Libby wait list, and it was a really, really long wait list, and then it just magically appeared in print at the library, and I didn't even know they had that. When I first looked it up, they didn't have it, and then all of a sudden they did. So I took it on a whim. I read it. It was good. Had a little bit of a Sarah Waters vibe. It was set in Victorian England, and it is about a young woman named Grace. Grace lives with her aunt, and she was taken in at age 9 because her parents were both mentally ill and were sent to institutions. They've taken her in, but they're not very warm. They're not particularly gracious about it, but she grows up there. She is face blind, except for the people that she sees all the time, every day. She cannot remember. She has to come up with clues about people's demeanor, their voice, their style, to remember who they are and who she's supposed to be remembering. And she has this artistic talent, but her talent specifically is for making copies. So she finds this out by accident, and it's kind of a photographic mind thing. It's really interesting combined with the face blindness, because she can look and study a piece of art, and then she doesn't have to have it in front of her. She makes her copy. And she finds out as she grows up that there's actually money in that skill. Fraudulent money, but money nonetheless. And she would like to escape the clutches of her aunt and be an independent woman. The other thing is that Grace is a lesbian. That's another reason she would like to be out on her own and not under the scrutiny of everybody in the household. Now, what happens, plot-wise, is that one of the sons in this family, Charles, disappeared after he left home at age 17. He was the only person that Grace got along with, who understood her. He's about 5 years older than her. And after a series of fights with his father, he decides to leave, and he goes and joins on with a ship. And for a while they receive letters, but then it just stops. At one point the father goes to try to meet him coming off a ship and get him to come back home, but he never comes off the ship. So they assume that he died at sea. Then they never hear from him. And then now it's years later. Charles would be about 30 years old, and they get a letter, and it says, I want to come back into the family. I'm in Rome. I'm an artist. I've been working on these ships, and now I'm ready to rejoin the family. And it just turns everything upside down. So Grace and her aunt go to Rome to try to figure out if this really is Charles. And it's so interesting because, of course, they have different reasons for wanting it to be Charles and for being skeptical that maybe it is not Charles. It could be an imposter. So they bring him home, and everyone's trying to figure out and has different opinions about whether it's Charles or not. It becomes very mysterious. That's all I want to say about the plot. But Grace's ambitions are to become independent, to find a way to make money, and then she also wants to figure out the truth about Charles. The themes in the book are about identity, independence, queerness, art and fraud, and also love, and it's a mystery, and it's very entertaining. It's not fluffy, but it's not too dark either. And really at the heart of the whole thing, it really is about money. Grace is obsessed with money, accumulating money, hiding the money. How much money will she need? She wants to be out of the clutches of this family and not beholden to other people. She wants to be authentic and live her own life. It was a good story. I had some theories a couple different times that I had to revise and change and didn't know the extent of things. So it kind of kept me guessing, and I had a really good time reading the original by Nell, and I do recommend it. You know, when you're reading and sometimes there's a parallel between two books that you didn't expect, you didn't plan that there was going to be any parallels. That kind of happened because at the same time I was rereading Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin, which is the story of a young man who goes to Paris and fails to accept his own identity and sexuality and causes a lot of grief for himself and others in the process. The young man in this story, David, is really afflicted with a lot of self-loathing. It takes place in the 1950s, and he's known since he was a teenager that he is attracted to men after a passionate evening with a friend, and then he just turns on that friend and cuts him off and just tries to repress it and tamp it down. But of course, your sexuality is what it is. So it keeps coming back to the surface. And despite other people trying to encourage him to be more authentic, to be honest, to explore and embrace his true self, he just struggles with this self-loathing and societal expectations. But he also struggles with money problems. And that was kind of a connection between this book, was that he's perpetually broke and trying to get his father to send him more money and trying to hide what's really going on in Paris. He has this passionate affair with Giovanni, a bartender, while his fiancée Hella is out of town. He's proposed to her. She goes away to think about it, and then he has this love affair with Giovanni. Okay, I just cut out a bunch of spoilers, but it's a tragic story that told by David about what happens in Paris. Again, there's some really terrific conversations in this book as well. It was so good I had to read it again, and it made me sad all over again, but I was surprised at some of those thematic parallels. Then, to lighten the mood, I then read The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. This was the first play in this month's 2 plays in my endless drama project, and it is Victorian and it is a riot. So I had never read this. I thought I had, but no, I have not. But now I have, and it is just so funny. It is about 2 young men who find out that they both have an imaginary alter ego that they use to get out of things they don't want to do, or to do things that they shouldn't do. So we have John, who has an alter ego named Ernest. He's John in the country and Ernest in the city. He has a young ward who thinks that there is a younger brother named Ernest who gets into all kinds of trouble in the city, and then John has to go to the city to straighten things out. John just wants to leave and go to the city and do whatever he wants to do. But Cecily, his young ward, becomes increasingly fascinated by this hidden brother. Meanwhile, his friend Algernon is a Bunburyist, and that is his made-up term for his fictional friend, Mr. Bunbury, who always gets desperately ill. He's chronically ill, and he gets to the point of near death every time there's something tedious that he does that Algernon does not want to attend. So Algie has a very overbearing aunt, the Lady Bracknell, and she has lots of boring dinners, and then all of a sudden Bunbury is too ill and he has to go visit him. That kind of house of cards cannot stand for long, and it humorously gets very complicated and involves some young women that they're interested in, and it's just light and funny. There's so many witty zingers about Victorian society, about men and women. It's just pure fun. And there is a wonderful broadcast. I'll put the link in the notes. Pat from Book Chat with Pat shared a wonderful production of it that she found on YouTube, and then I watched it, and it's really good. And Brian Bedford plays Lady Bracknell, and it's hilarious. So I will put a link to that in the notes. And then last night, I finished reading The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. I was really looking forward to this, and it wasn't quite I don't know. I didn't really know what I expected, but maybe not quite this. So the Time Machine, of course, I did know that it's a Victorian novel, science fiction. It's about a man who invents a time machine. And he sits in there and he sets the dials and he goes off to the future. I didn't know if he goes to one place or if he goes to the future and the past. I didn't really know. Once I saw how short it was, I figured he probably didn't go to too many places. So the framework of it is that he is telling a group of men who've come to hear about his research about this time machine that he makes. And then he goes on an adventure and he comes back and he tries to tell them about all the things that happen, and they have a hard time believing him. Most of the narrative is his story of what happened when he goes 800,000 years into the future. So what I liked about this book was some of the weird descriptions. There's a scene where he goes to a dilapidated old museum and sees all the decayed things from our civilization. This strange people that live above and below the world, and also his reflections on contemporary Victorian society and how he sees the current stratification of wealthy and poor people and how it could move in the future to something like this, what he calls the haves and the have-nots, but it literally is turned into two separate sets of people who live in opposition above ground and underground. So what I didn't like was that there just wasn't enough of anything. He gets to the world and he's not that curious. He describes these strange people, but he doesn't really try to learn much about them. And he leaves these hints that he's going to find out more about them and tell you later, but then he never does. And he forms a kind of bizarre attachment with this young female creature. He calls them the Eloys. And I'm not quite sure what was going on there. There's some supposedly exciting parts where he's in battle against the Morlocks, which are the creatures that live underground, but it's not that exciting. The things that I wanted to know that I thought he was going to portray aren't really in the story. So I was kind of underwhelmed, but then I thought it had a really fantastic ending. The very, very ending of the story was really good. So I'm glad I read it, but it didn't do as much for me as I was hoping. And then that gets to what I'm currently reading and what I'm about to read. So I am about halfway through, or maybe a little more than halfway through, No Name by Wilkie Collins. I am loving this. I'm on a little schedule. I read about 40 pages a day. And my goal is to have time to read this and then go on into Dr. Thorne in the second half of the month. And I am really enjoying this. So we're back to con artists and frauds again. So there's some kind of theme going on. In this story, we have a family, and there's two young adult daughters, Magdalene and Nora. And early on in the story, we first get kind of a flavor of what their family life is all about, the kind of bonds they have with their parents. Their parents have an untimely demise. And when this happens, the girls find out that they are not going to come into the sizable inheritance that their father had planned for them because their parents had been unmarried. And it's a complicated legal story about what happened, why, and then how they tried to fix it and failed. But the bottom line is the money is not going to Nora and Magdalene and the property and the estate and everything. It's going to this estranged brother of their father that they didn't even know existed, who is hostile and stingy. And he has an adult son who's also hostile and stingy, vain, a person who thinks that he's very powerful and smart, and he really is not. His housekeeper is very formidable. And so anyway, Nora accepts her fate and begins to look for a job as a governess, which was what happens to all Victorian ladies who suddenly don't have any money. But Magdalene, she decides she wants revenge. She wants the money and she wants revenge for this meanness. And so she decides to tap into her natural acting abilities, try to either get this money through either appeal or swindling. She will do whatever it takes. And she falls in with a character named Captain Rag, who is a distant relative of her mother's, who's a con artist himself, and has been trying to get money out of this family for years. And they start cooking up various schemes. There's humor, there's suspense, there's intrigue. It's a really crackling good story. And what else is coming up then? Today I'm starting a buddy read with my friend Louise, who we live on opposite ends of the world. So Louise messaged me this morning and said, well, I'm starting the book. It's right before bed. And I said, well, I just got up and I'm also going to start the book. And it is On the Calculation of Volume 2 by Solvej, Balle, and translated by Barbara Haveland. We read the first one together. I think that one was a reread for Louise. She wanted to read it again before the second one came along. And now we're going to read the second one. So that's starting today and I'm very excited. Also, I forgot to put this in my October TBR, but the banned book club at my local library, this month's selection is Animal Farm, and we're going to be discussing it on Wednesday. This past Monday, we had a banned book tea for Banned Book Week, and that was really fun, but our official discussion book for the month is Animal Farm by George Orwell. I have this cool folio edition that I found at my mom's house. I really believe that I've never read this. I think it's one of those books that is in my kind of subconscious because I know what it's about and I know about the themes, but I've never actually read it, even though I really enjoyed some other works by George Orwell. So Animal Farm, and so these two are for sure in the next several days. I'm going to start these this weekend. And then some maybes for the upcoming week. I might start reading some of the essays in I Remember Nothing by Nora Ephron. This is my nonfiction selection for the month. This book was a gift from my friend Michael, and I've been wanting to get to it because I really loved I Feel Bad About My Neck, and so I want to read these essays. And then I want to maybe, when those are a little further down the road or when one of those is finished, I want to hit one of my spooky choices. And I'm thinking about, I'm going to see where my mood is. Either the reread of We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson, which is just psychologically bizarre, kind of deliciously dark and twisted, or my new book by Dan Chaon, One of Us. I really want to read this new novel, one of my favorite authors. I don't know. I just got to see about my mood. I might have to do this one first because I've been barely restraining myself from opening up this book. So this might be coming up on the heels of these other ones. But I'm kind of cooking along with my October selections, and I hope you are too. Let me know in the comments if you have read any of these books that I've just talked about, or if I have piqued your interest, and what you have been reading over the past week or two. And I hope that you have a good weekend in store. Are you getting any advent calendars? Let me know. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.